understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Oh,
Happy Friday. We are
sorry.
here with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm so excited. I'm here with Jennifer Arnold, CEO of Minerva. How are you doing today, Jennifer?
I'm great. I love that intro. That was awesome.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
We worked hard to get that done, and it was a lot of takes.
Oh, I bet.
Get it right. So that's the behind the scenes. I'll be honest with you on that. Today's episode, leveraging AI, revolutionizing AML compliance and finance. We are going to get into it. It's going to be an exciting show. We're going to really jump into AML and all the wonderful things that comes with it. Let me do some housekeeping first. So we are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. We also have a separate stream going from Instagram. When I look that way, those are my Instagram people. So on that note, I am your host, Anambio Swagu. This is the Tech Behind FinTech. We are live every Friday, 12 p.m. Now, with that being said, let me get into Jennifer's bio, and I want to jump into this topic. Tons of questions and tons of things we can learn from her regarding AML and the wonderful things they're doing. Jennifer Arnold is the co-founder and CEO of Minerva, an award-winning AI-driven AML compliance platform. Jennifer has made it her mission to demystify anti-money laundering AML compliance through demonstrating how a risk-based approach leads to revenue growth. She is well acquainted with the challenges of designing and implementing AML programs without introducing unnecessary complexity or cost, whether it is in fintechs, Web3, or incumbent banks. Jen is focused on an effective and efficient compliance approach. This has earned her a spot on Women to Watch and Risky Woman and numerous invitations to share her knowledge and insights as a panelist and guest speaker. Minerva AI won the CRTA's 2022 award for Best AI for the prevention and detection of financial crime and named to the 2023 and 2024 AI FinTech 100 list for most innovative technology companies in financial services. Wow. You love my intro. I love your bio. Oh my goodness. Killing it out here.
That's a lifetime in the making. A lifetime in the making.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So let's get into it. For those that don't know, Jennifer, can you break down what AML is and why it's important?
Yeah. So AML stands for Anti-Money Laundering. That is a series of processes and controls that every financial services provider, particularly regulated entities, need to perform to abide by the law, protect our financial ecosystem from bad actors like terrorists, traffickers, drug dealers, organized crime, etc. That is the purpose, is to safeguard our financial systems by being really careful and understanding exactly who it is that we're doing business with as a bank, as a fintech, as a crypto.
Wonderful. What led you into AML?
Oh my goodness, a complete and total like happy accident. So I had been working for a long time in communications, and the longer I was in communications, the more I realized I was actually working in risk. And then a friend called me. She was working at a bank. They were implementing a large transaction monitoring system. This is very expensive, very complex piece of technology that was going in, and they needed to build a bridge between the financial intelligence unit, the investigators, and this technology. And so my job there was really to help the investigators better understand how this technology was going to serve them, and to ensure that we mapped in the right processes and design on the technology side so it actually satisfied the requirements that the investigators had to meet with their work. So that was kind of day one. It was come in, meet the team. Do you think you would like to do this? And then some very intensive learning, training, mentored by some of the best people in the industry during that time. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with AML as a discipline. I really connected to this mission that we would be doing something that's not just for ourselves, but in fact was serving us as a nation. No matter where you live, the purpose of that work is really, really meaningful. So we don't have things like 9/11 or October 7th or every horrific thing that's happened in between those two dates.
Oh, so it seems like, I mean, based on what you're saying, AML to you is just it's bigger than getting sales from a bank to implement something. It
Yeah,
really stops, organized crime, terrorist activities, human trafficking, and the list goes on with any type of illegal activity because, obviously the money has to get cleaned and go somewhere.
yeah,
So you can make money through illegal means, but how do you now repurpose it to actually use it? And that's through our banking systems or our some crypto platforms and so forth. So for you, that's really the driving force behind what you do, why you
yeah,
do what you
yeah, yeah. I thought it can be, and it is not always. So I get that out of the gate. Um, it has this potential between being this major like force multiplier for good globally, for protecting our communities, our kids, our financial system. It's there's so much that we could be doing with this work, and I want to help get us there. I want to help get us to satisfying the purpose of that work, and not always just the requirements and the regulations and the letter of the law.
that's amazing. Been in banking for over 20 years myself, and to be honest with you, you're I've talked to people in AML. I'm not saying that they don't have the same mission, but this is the first time I've ever heard it articulated in that way. Usually it's, we have to take our once a year AML compliance class, and we have to make sure that everyone understands it, even if we don't work in that particular sector or branch or division. That's like a common thing to
Yeah, yeah,
see. If this you take it as part of compliance, and that's how we that's how I looked at it for years. But having you painted in the light that you just painted it, I can see how that can play into a bigger mission and a driving force.
yeah. I certainly think so. Like, there's no doubt that when we talk to a bank or fintech, the concern is cost, right? AML compliance programs historically are incredibly expensive to run because they require a whole lot of people to do that work, right? We've just kind of brute forced our way through satisfying the regulations for our regulator with the use of human bodies. And so there's always this tension of like what it's costing us, the organization, the bank, to run that program. And often AML can be the obstacle to getting new products and services to market because it has to go through an approval process and there has to be transaction monitoring and so on and so forth. And I really wanted to start thinking about, and like, to be clear, pretty much everyone I worked with thought I was out of my mind, but I really thought we had this opportunity to be a partner to the revenue generating lines of business at the banks that I worked at. Like, if we could be faster, be more nimble, understand risk more clearly and more like earlier on in the relationship with the customer, we can accelerate getting new products and services to market. We can accelerate moving into new jurisdictions. And the first few times I pitched it at two different banks, I was like basically left out of the room.
So rewind, because what you just said, I want to kind of dive into that. You said everyone around you thought you were crazy.
Oh yeah,
No, and I want to dive into that. Why? Because usually, like, here's the deal. In these fields, background is engineering and cybersecurity, and it's something you said that I want to touch on that too before we. But usually, from what I've seen, right, when people think someone's crazy, it's two things. It's two options. Either one, yeah, they are literally crazy, they're bat out of their minds, right? Or two, they're seeing something that no one else is seeing. And it's just a matter of time before that thing comes to fruition. So,
Agreed.
assuming you're the latter, right?
Big
So,
leap, but let's do it. Yeah, let's assume it's that.
big leap, big leap. Let's talk about that. Why did they think that?
Because I think, AML, like basically AML is the business unit inside most organization that everybody loves to hate because it is bureaucratic and slow and expensive, and is usually a constantly growing cost center. AML is a problem to be solved, insofar as it is a growing cost center that nobody really wants to deal with, but they are required to do so by law. And that was the thing that I heard and saw over and over again, is that we were something AML. And when I say we, I refer to the AML as an industry. We were something that people were trying to figure out how to manage, right? And I'm like, I think we're kind of looking at this the wrong way. We have a real opportunity here to materially change, like the safety and sovereignty of every country's nationhood that's part of like the FATFA countries, for example. If we could do this work really, really well, if we could move it closer to real time, if we could work in coordination with other financial institutions, law enforcement, and intelligence, we could do so much incredible good. And so really our first point is, let's speed up the process. Let's try and move AML into something closer to near time, real time, like our fraud partners do, right? Like most of that stuff is happening in seconds. And that model makes sense if you want to stop something from happening. And AML has really been built as a mechanism to identify something terrible after it's already happened. And that just seems incredibly wrong-headed to me.
But if you think about it, like, which makes sense, right? Like, um, and but this is a conversation. It's just I'm thinking about it, right?
Mhm.
In order to launder money, right, you have to have money in the system in order to launder it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it helps.
So it helps. So because the money's in the system now, it's from a industry perspective now, you need to identify that. We know that, but if we start looking at it, that's one aspect based on what you just said now. But if we start looking at what are some preventative measures, that goes on the customer due diligence side.
Yeah. It can go to customer due diligence, KYC, AML, even more like an enhanced due diligence approach earlier in the relationship. But like, I think about all the sort of like mundane sayings that we know, like what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Our someone's past behavior is the best indicator of their future behavior. Like these are isms because they're true and they see to prove themselves out over and over again. So I was like, well, then why, when we pick a new customer or when a customer picks us as a bank, why do we not look at things like adverse media, or if there has been criminal or legal activity? Why are we not looking at a broader pieces or broader sources of data to give us context around the customer? Because the customer, every one of them, good and bad, every single one is going to show up with, one or two pieces of government ID, maybe a piece of mail. Maybe they're going to do IDV if they're doing like onboarding virtually, etc., and a credit report. And presto chango, now you can have a bank account at my institution, for example. Well, what if I had a better understanding of who that person was and their context in the world? So maybe they have had financial crime risk indicators in their profile, which would have me not deny them service, but certainly monitor them more closely if I onboard them as a client, right? How can I mitigate risk if I don't know it's walking in my door? How can I manage risk if I don't recognize it when it walks in my front door? And so I think that's a really great place for AML to start, right? Which is maybe include open source and adverse media during your onboarding screening process to get a beat on the customer. And is this a good customer or maybe not the best customer for your organization based on your risk appetite? I think that's kind of a gimme. And we don't need anything to change, right? We don't need regulations to change because God knows that takes quite some time. That's something, those are choices that organizations can make today. Now, the argument then again is, oh, well, you're going to increase my cost or you're going to increase friction at onboarding, which means I will be less competitive than my neighbor bank. Well, I guess it depends on how you approach the problem. Are you a community of financial institutions working together to lock out bad actors? Then it would make sense that you would adopt a similar approach, and where legal and appropriate, share that data so you know who you're doing business with. Like these to me, and I know for some people they think it's very like Pollyanna or something like that, and I'm like, no, this is just practical and tactical. These are changes that we can do today to onboard customers that are going to be revenue generators for us, because we're not going to have to onboard them in a year or two because they're laundering money, they're structuring, they're like whatever the crime is. That customer that you onboard, that stays with you, that brings you more of their assets and resources to invest in your business, that's the customer that you want, not the one who's going to fly in your front door, do some terrible things, and either exit or get tossed out, because offboarding a customer is incredibly expensive. So why do that part?
Totally understandable. And it sounds like when you start looking at open source intelligence and different other forms of media or information that you can gather, that's more of a current state of where you picture AML, would you say?
So I would love for the industry to move to that model. Right now, we do sanctions screening mandatory everywhere. Like, if you would like to function as a FI, you must do this thing. Identifying politically exposed persons, which are considered higher risk because they're more likely to be, victim of or party to fraud, bribery, corruption, etc. That's not true everywhere in the world, but for many jurisdictions, identifying your PEPs is a big deal. And treating them as higher risk is also mandatory in some jurisdictions, not all. But that's really all we look at from a risk assessment perspective at the beginning of that relationship. So if we looked at adverse media, that would be helpful.
Let's talk about that part, right? Because that sounds similar to what's been done historically. Like I want to paint a picture, right? Rewind 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it's about to be, we're in 2004 going to 2005, right? What you just described sounds like what we were doing back then. Or am I missing something?
So in the onboarding process, unless that person is considered higher risk for whatever reason, the products and services they choose, their job, like whatever it is, we typically didn't do adverse media or open source research on a client unless we were moving to maybe enhanced due diligence, right? So we've identified something early on that says, hey, this is potentially a higher risk individual or a higher risk customer. We need a little more information. So maybe we'll go and do like a Google search. So sometimes that happens, but it is not a requirement. It is not mandatory.
Oh, if we look back, so I want to paint a picture of past. We understand what the AML industry was doing, their common practices, and then come into present state.
Sure.
And then what's your vision for the future? So people could just get a good breath of understanding of
so I'll go back.
I'll
go back to the investigation unit. So what year is this? I think it's 2013. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's 2013. I'm working very closely with a group of investigators, and they taught me so very much. When I sat down and did ride-alongs, which is what I called sitting next to investigator while they were doing an active case, I was astounded because the process looked like this. A case could take a day or more to do, one single case. Imagine you have 50,000 in a year. roughly. Each investor gets maybe one case done. That's a massive backlog of cases building up of unmitigated risk sitting in your organization. And the process looked like this. I come into work, I go into my case management tool, my manager has assigned me, or I've been auto-assigned a case to work on. I then go to, I don't know, 3 to 5 to 7 external vendor solutions that we use. I run the name and the data that I have through each of those solutions, trying to collect different pieces of information. Sanctions, political exposure. Most organizations were at that time too afraid to turn on an adverse media solution because it generated way too much noise and you would bury your FIU. And after they do that, they go through, let's say there's sanctions.
FIU?
Financial Intelligence Unit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's usually a large team of investigators. So human beings who are sitting there who are literally pouring through the detail of someone's customer record and their transactional behavior, trying to figure out if there's a problem or not, right? So maybe they go to 3 to 5 vendor solutions, they run a name, they have to work their way through a series of what are called false positives, which are, it's hit on a name match, but the match isn't actually your customer, it's somebody else named John Smith. Imagine how much fun that is. So they do that.
And also clarification, these are for customers that's already in the bank and an investigation has been opened. Someone trying to be onboarded. That's accurate?
Yeah, I'm talking to the investigation. So this is already an active customer.
Excellent.
Yeah, they've had a transaction that has caused the bank like basically a little alarm to go off to say this is kind of weird for this customer. After they do that, they copy and paste their findings, usually into a Word document. And then they maybe consult a variety of internal Excel spreadsheets. Yep. So we're keeping information there. That makes no sense to me. And we're copying and pasting what's relevant back into that Word doc. That's going to become our case document. And then they sit down and they try to Google or search engine their way to a solution, trying to find other pieces of information about the individual. So that is things like negative news and open source and criminal and legal activity and networks and relationships. All of these pieces of information that would give me some sense of context of my customer. You know, when the regulator says know your customer, they don't mean just validate them against the picture on their ID. They mean know them. Who are they? What do they do? Where does their money come from? Where do they send it? What do they spend it on? That's the expectation. So that Googling part, let's say they do like 30 to 35 different searches, taking the customer's name, private information, and putting it into a public search engine. Google returns my search. I have like pages and pages of possible matches. I need to sift through that to see if that's actually my client again, or just somebody with the same name. And then if I find my information, or even if I don't, I copy and paste that into my case document to prove that I satisfied these requirements as it relates to understanding the risk of my customer. Once I've done all of that, I sit down and I read the file and try to figure out if there's anything in there that would give me cause for concern.
Question. If I'm laundering money, I'm going to have the lightest Google footprint imaginable.
No.
No, really?
Not necessarily. I mean, so there are very organized crime, smart, right? Like they have their own systems and processes and workarounds that works like a machine. But like, you know, the guy who, presented at onboarding as maybe a contractor or something to get his bank account open. And then as you're doing your open source search, you find his Instagram and he's sitting on the hood of a Lamborghini and you're like, well, that's weird. But there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I wonder where that money really is coming from, right? Like it's not all super geniuses who are, trying to clean money that they have, stolen or, made through some sort of like criminal enterprise. So yeah, so they do. Everyone has a footprint. And I think about it this way. If someone has nothing, no digital footprint, my radar kind of goes up. But I'm like, that's kind of odd. And then but most people do have like sufficient information to verify that it is really that same person, that the person you're investigating is the person whose, paper trail it is that you're identifying. So a day has gone by. The investigator has run the name a million times through a bunch of different systems and copied and pasted all this information. And now they need to sit down and read all the information and try to understand, is there a thread in here that would cause me to be concerned about their transactional behavior? Or is this person exactly as they seem, who had one odd transaction, and maybe that's a different conversation with the customer about expanding products and services if they're doing things that they didn't say they were going to do at onboarding? But that's a lot of wasted time. And we don't pay, well, we do, but we shouldn't be paying risk professionals to execute Google searches and copy and paste. Those are not investigation tools. The investigation tool sits in their head. It's their critical thinking skills and their ability to discern patterns, red flags, typologies, and say, oh, this looks like this type of operation or this type of crime, or actually this looks like elder abuse and I should probably involve my manager and we escalate and someone should check on the client. That's what the investigator is there to do, not all of this other manual, menial work.
And you say a lot of time based on that process that you just described. Is that about what, like 3 days?
It could be a day, it could be 3 days, could be larger if it's a more kind of elaborate network. But the alert that caused that case to be created in the first place is already 30 to 90 days years old, right? We're not getting that information to an analyst in real time. There is a queue of work that they need to work through. And in an ideal scenario, each of those cases would be prioritized by risk, right? Which I want to deal with the riskiest stuff first and then work my way through the rest of the caseload. But because it takes a day or more to do that kind of work, most organizations have a very robust backlog of alerts and cases that no one's had a chance to look at yet. And so my thinking was, if we take away this work that can be done by a machine and that can be automated, right, and give that data and the insight back to the analyst in 20 seconds instead of 7 hours, 8 hours, even 2 hours or 1, we have a better shot at getting this right sooner.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk about that. Right. So we went back how it was done. We went back 10 years. That's a good span of technology to go back 10 years. We're now in 2024. You got all these awards for your company. You've done some cool stuff. Okay.
That's some really cool stuff.
With in particular the institutions that your company interacts with. How does that process now work?
So if someone is using us, what they typically have is the ability to assess an alert or investigate a case in under a minute from the data aggregation, analysis, and reporting side. That information is put in front of their analyst, that risk professional that I was talking about, who then can take ownership and make the right choice for their organization based on their risk appetite about what they're seeing in front of them, instead of wasting that person's day doing all of that other work of searching and copying and pasting and trying to find a thread in there that tells them a story of risk. We can do that for them. So they are able to either do more with less, or increase the capacity of their existing team so they're not in a backlog situation anymore, which is unpleasant, and even more unpleasant when the regulator comes knocking and that's the situation that you're in. So for us, we are an accelerant for our clients to help them identify risk early on, help them to make better risk decisions, like hundreds of times faster than they would otherwise be able to do so.
Help me out, right? Let's so we can just get a little bit more clarity on that, what you just said. Let's take it back to the same scenario you just described in 2013, right? 50,000 backlog, right? Case backlog. This person in the FIU, they get the case. current state, what do they do then? Before, like you said, they'll
Mm.
go through the case, they'll do some searches. What are they doing now with the current technology? And
Yeah.
you can,
So it really depends on the implementation, but typically what we'll see is they have a case management tool in place, as they always have.
yeah,
And instead of doing all of that work about identifying the data relevant to the client, so sanctions, political exposure, adverse media, criminal and legal, etc., instead of hunting for that manually, they either have that data piped from Minerva into their case management system, or they come to Minerva, they do their investigation in the platform. It's a few seconds, like it's 20 seconds before you get a report. And then they can take that data or that report and upload it to their case management tool. So if you did on average, a case a day before, you can do multiples and multiples of that now.
how was the you mentioned a problem before with false positives. How
Mm.
does that
How does that, sorry?
the false positives? Are they still seeing that? You mentioned that
Oh,
earlier on.
yeah, it's funny because every vendor of all time will always say, "Oh, we can reduce your false positives." And I think the question is, well, how are you going about doing that? Because if you're simply tinkering with my threshold on accuracy, fuzzy matching, etc., that still represents a kind of risk that I might not be super comfortable articulating during an examination with my regulator. For us, what Minerva is doing is really looking at a a great deal of data with every analysis and augmenting the data so the user can either understand very quickly simply by rolling over an image on the screen if it's a match to their true client and this is something they need to deal with, or they can dismiss the alert and reject it or whatever because it is actually not a match to their client and they have enough evidence to do that contained in the instance that we provided. So for us, we think about false positives as, if your entity resolution engine, your technology is really, really good at identifying the target accurately, you'll get less false positives, full stop. But what you also get is better risk identification, true positives, and the ability to dismiss those false positives more quickly. Because often what happens is you'll get a false positive, it's the same name as your client, but there's not enough information in there in that alert to really be able to suss out whether it's a match or not to your client. And that takes time, and which means that's more time wasted when the investigator could be doing sort of higher order thinking or a higher order activity that would be more valuable to their institution.
Typically, to become an investigator, what type of background do you need?
Ah, this is such a good question. Because here's the thing. Um, there was a time where, and I'll say kids, and really what I mean is young adults, graduates, would come into an organization, into a bank, and they would be trained and educated in an ongoing and very robust way. They would be partnered up with a senior investigator, and they would learn it like you learn almost like a trade, except it's quite uh, it takes a lot of processing power to get through that work. Um, and or we would find risk professionals who are in like another flavor or area of risk who are interested in money laundering, and so we would bring them in and show them the ropes, and then their application for their own thinking and how they think about risk they could apply to this new job. And then probably about a decade ago, I would say, we went through this terrible transformation where we really stopped investing in investigators in a meaningful way. And we started treating them like cost centers. We started treating them like a call center. So your only job was to come in and push through the numbers. How many cases can you shut down in a day? That's what the job became about. And we forgot about the part where we're there to mitigate risk, where we're there to keep bad actors out of our our financial ecosystems. And that has had, I say, fairly terrible effect on the industry as a whole and on the effectiveness of AML in general, right? And we have lots of instances where this is so. We can't have systemic failures like at TD, for example, without that kind of degradation of the skill set happening at every level. compliance as a culture is a catchphrase. It's not a real thing if you're not investing in those resources to be really skilled investigators who have sharp minds and excellent critical thinking skills, because that's what we need in those roles. We don't need people pushing out numbers.
You mentioned treated like a call center. So have you seen cases in which your AML team is outsourced maybe to another region outside of the place where the bank headquarters?
Yeah, I would wager many banks will have an on-site team, right? And they'll have an in-country or on-site team, and then they will have another, cache of investigators off-site through a BPO service, through a consulting firm that provides like bodies to do the work, right? Again, this brute force effort of just piling bodies on the problem instead of looking for intelligent solutions that could actually accelerate a good chunk of that work for your existing team.
Okay, interesting. Understand. Did you see that transition happening about a decade ago, or like 5 years? Like, when did you see that transition happening in the industry from what you just said in
Like,
terms of
watched it unravel in a place where I was operating, where I was working in like 2014, 2015. That's when it was the first time I was like, wait a second, like there's a shift happening here. And it started with really talented investigators leaving where I was to go to another institution. And I'm like, okay, so we have an exodus of talent. That's concerning. What's going on? Is it cultural? Is it management? Like, what's the deal? And then talking to others at other banks going, yeah, we're seeing the same thing. And it was just kind of this like, rotation of talent moving from one FI to another. And then as people were trying to shore up their programs, they were just hiring anyone to sit in a seat and push through volume. And I've had more than one executive tell me, like, it's not rocket science. Anybody can do it. Like, if you can sell jeans, you can work a case, kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's entirely true.
we have a comment from the audience while I like doing live shows.
That's terrible. Yes, it is. It is terrible, and it's heartbreaking too, right? Because it's I see it like this. So there's people like me who got really salty about how things were working and wanted to try and build something or think about the problem differently. So there's like a bunch of folks like me doing this. There are the folks who are seasoned and mature who stayed in the FIs, hoping to get those FIs back on track because they are like the holder of the conch. They have all the knowledge, they have the skill set, and they're waiting for like the next gen of kids to come in that want to know what they know. So I think there's kind of two parties there. And then there are, also folks who did their time in industry at a large bank and were like, to hell with this, and stepped out and either act as an independent consultant or have gone to a consulting firm. Yeah. So like the talent, has migrated away from the industry. I'm really hoping now that we're at a place where we're seeing the industry to start to come back together. But time will tell.
Oh, we were just to the audience. Jennifer and I were both talking prior to the show that we both attended Money 2020, and that's a place where it's like I call it the Super Bowl for like fintech financial services.
Yeah,
Just
I call it prom season.
yeah, see, there's different names, but it's like humongous. I mean, everyone there is doing something. Whether they have a $500,000 vendor platform and they're just walking around. They're all in the industry. And in talking to the chief strategy officer of the organization, from a press perspective, a good point was made that what the different vendors and different things that you see there, they have their you can tell where the industry is going. And one of the things that I've noticed, AML was huge. So many AML fintechs, service providers, fraud prevention, AML, it was just a ton of them. And from an industry perspective, I mean, based on like overall, like there's different aspects of fintech, obviously, when you go there. that seemed to be okay. This is
Yeah.
really, really important to the industry. This is like a lot of people are thinking about that. Do you think that has a part to do with the rise in AI? And now you're seeing solutions that can help.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting line, and here's the line, at least in my head. So we take so much of our cue from the regulators in the jurisdictions where we operate. So what are they comfortable with in terms of technology? And many regulators have said, like, we get it. You're going to need to use AI to accelerate your processes and make this more efficient, and we are on board with that. Our ask is that you make sure that whatever that technology is, AI or otherwise, that you have no black box solutions, right? We need to be able to see it. We need to see the data go in. We need to see the mechanisms of data transformation and calculation and the output. And there should be a very easy way to understand how that output was derived from those inputs through this cycle of transformation, which I think is fair. But what that does mean is that the regulators currently don't have a huge appetite for like open source Gen AI tools, because it's series and series of challenges, which is you can't know, like, you can never actually see the source material. You're probably providing sensitive information back to an engine that you probably shouldn't be doing that with. I do think there is understanding and appreciation of things like private LLMs if you're wanting to work in the Gen AI space. I think of Minerva as being very applied AI. And I think, like, you see this movement because, like, since COVID, fraud is a very different beast. It is, like, honestly, fraudsters, money launderers, some of the most creative, fastest moving thinkers on the planet. I wish they would make art instead of crime. But, like, the innovation, the speed at which they move is phenomenal. If we could move that quickly, we would not have the challenges we do. They're not sitting in a committee going, I don't know, is that an ethical use of AI, when they're planning their scams? That's not how that industry works.
Um, it's so interesting you said that, right? Have different thoughts on criminology. Um, you know, I had a in grad school. So I was in a cybersecurity program. I had a FBI teacher. Like, we had a couple of professors that were in the FBI, and he was saying, he was giving some scenario about criminal activity, and I was like, after you made a certain amount, why not just stop? And he was like, let me ask you a question. I was like, what? Like, are you a criminal? I said, no. He goes, exactly. They're not
Yeah,
stopping. He's like, yeah, that's
that
you're
is correct.
thinking as a person that you're that's not your lifestyle. You're like, okay, let me make a certain amount, and then I'm good. But he said, no, that's not usually how they think.
No,
And it's really another part that's interesting in what you said. It's you know, oh, this is an interesting comment, because they are not strapped by regulations. True.
yeah, yeah, or ethical or moral concerns in any way, shape, or form.
Any way, shape, or form. But and I think when you look at that, when you mention that they're evolving and things like that, you have to. I always thought about this. It was, I don't know, but I think I got it from I don't know, it was a movie, a documentary or something. But when you're looking at the people, the preventers, or the people in FIUs, right? You could afford to make mistakes, or even you can afford. I mean, you're not saying
Mm.
you want to, but they only get one shot on the other side. So the level of efficiency, you get one shot, or you're in prison for like a long time. So you want to make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. So that's another interesting aspect that you mentioned. So one of the schemes I want to talk to you about, right? Because I,
Mm.
I was having a conversation with someone who's in the fraud prevention. Actually, I met at Money 2020. We were talking about this scheme that came to light a few years ago, in which before you have money laundering, in which you have layering, structuring, all these terms for those that don't
Yep.
know. Layering,
The
basically,
three stages of money laundering. Yes.
you know
Yeah.
what? You're more an expert in it. Can you help us understand the 3 stages, and then I'll get into this other
Yeah,
scamming?
I mean, yeah, it's I'm not sure. I'm just looking something in here. I am not sure it is as I don't always think the 3 stages. So what they teach us when we're young is that these 3 stages happen in sequence. And I don't think that's really the case anymore because the nature of our financial systems have changed so much. So the first stage of money laundering is the placement stage, right? Just get your money into the organization somehow. You could use Smurfs, so a bunch of different people taking money and depositing it into the same account. You've got money in account, yay. And then there's layering. So how am I going to move that money around in a way that would obscure its source, so no one could point back and say, "Oh, that looks like they might be doing money laundering." And we see things like when money's getting moved for like no economic purpose whatsoever, they're not buying anything. It's just like skipping through countries and then coming back to that account or another account, and what have you. That's just an attempt to obscure where like what's the to and from on that money. And then there's integration. So how do I then take that money that's been so lovely laundered for me and move it back into the legitimate, financial ecosystem? Am I going to buy something? How do I do that? Those are kind of the pieces, but I'm not sure anything that we do is that cut and dry anymore.
Interesting. Well, I want to talk about this recent e-commerce scam. We have to take a moment from our sponsors, and then when we get back, I want to jump into it and get your thoughts on it, and you can help us understand it.
Okay.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on On-Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Just like that, we are back. So I want to talk to you about, I think it came to fruition like maybe a few years ago. Launderers setting up an e-commerce site, right? So they'll set up this fake site that and they selling either counterfeit goods or like things that are not worth what they said it's worth. So like they could have
Any
cheap
Facebook ad almost ever.
You said what?
Right? Almost any Facebook ad, like almost ever, right? Like knockoff goods or cheaper versions of something that it's probably highly sought after.
They get a network of their friends, or not their friends, the people that they want to launder money with, and they basically sell that to each other, and they keep it all online. And this way, the money you're seeing with the head nodding. I see that you're very familiar with this. Can you explain that to the audience, please?
Oh, I doubt that very much. So I think the object is to try to have legitimate buyers engage in the process. But most people, not everyone, but most people are savvy enough to think, oh, I should probably do I'll check up on this vendor before I go ahead and make this purchase, right? And maybe they go to, they're looking for verified buyers, or going to, I don't know, like Trustpilot, whatever, however they're trying to source that the scam that you're referencing there is they're trying to build the community so they can obtain the funds from unsuspecting and legitimate buyer, but they need to create the front of looking like a legitimate business. I think that is what you're referring to.
It was something like that, or it's another way for them to just move money. Like they have this pilot, they like you said, they want to place it in. And what I heard, I gotta learn more about it. But it was one of the
Okay.
money laundering perspective. I was like interested in learning more about that. I'm totally fascinated by what you do. Very interested. At the end of each show, we give our guests 5 minutes to talk about their company. Well, not 5 minutes, but just in general. Like I
Yeah.
just 5 minutes out for some reason, but we give them a moment to talk about the stuff. It's a comment from the audience. This was an excellent show. Thank you, Jennifer and Andy.
Oh, thanks.
The meeting now, but I look forward to catching it, the record. Yeah, and for everyone, look, I always say this. I say this at the end of the show, but I'm going to repeat myself. Whether you're watching it in real time, whether you watch it tomorrow, next year, we appreciate you for tuning into the Tech Behind FinTech. Wow, final thoughts, Jennifer, on what we just said.
Final thoughts. Well, as you may have discovered, I am a AML person, less so a fraud person. And while I think those two disciplines must work in concert, I still think we have some very big differences on the nature of the crime that's being perpetrated and how we intervene. So I will never, well, not never, I would not currently refer to myself as a fraud expert. Even though today's fraudster is most likely tomorrow's money launderer, right? Like there is a continuum in that relationship.
Graduation, it's like a graduation. You become a fraudster, and then the next level up is
you save them out of their money, and now you just got to figure out how you're going to get it clean so you can use it for something, useful. I guess for me, and again, I know some people are like, oh, that's wishful thinking. I really do think that we have wasted a lot of time and opportunity on, what people refer to as tick box compliance, of looking at the regulations like they're disable us in somehow. I really think that, regulation doesn't mean no crime, and having an AML program doesn't guarantee that your organization isn't going to launder money. It's, there's systems and controls. They're meant there to try to stem the tide, right? Ideally. I think that financial services providers, law enforcement, intelligence can work more cooperatively together on things like sharing data, sharing information, and trying to do it as close to real time as possible. I think that they can have a very real effect in the quality of life for every American, Canadian, like pick a country, any country. I believe in the purpose of that work. I believe that human trafficking, like, it just shouldn't exist. How can you even consider yourself a human being if you're willing to buy and sell another? Like, it is beyond thinking. And I think often when we hear about money laundering, it feels very like remote and not real world, but there are very real world consequences. Minerva works with a few anti-human trafficking organizations. That is like the big purpose of why we do what we do, because we can literally save lives. It is possible to do that. We can protect our nation's sovereignty by protecting our financial ecosystem from outside actors who wish to do, our democracy's harm. Those are real things that we can do. It is not just bureaucratic pain in the face paperwork, even though oftentimes it feels exactly like that. But that is not its purpose. And for me and for my colleagues and for my industry, when I say we, I am referring to AML professionals. I am referring to banks. I am referring to our regulators. I am referring to financial crime officers in the police force, etc. Like, we are a we, and we need to operate like a we. And if we use technology like Minerva that enables us to get the data faster, understand it faster, share it faster, we have a better shot at turning the tables on our criminal counterparts, because they are just they're so fast, they're so innovative. Like, mad respect for all criminals, right? Like, I will not, folks who are doing those things, they're not encumbered by rules like we are, but they are moving really quickly, and we are not.
Wow. I'm going to give you the stage now to let people know how you can find you. You can talk about Minerva, and I'll do that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, I'm Jen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Minerva. You can find us at gominerva.com. or info@gominerva.com if you want to talk to somebody. We're always happy to talk to someone about their program, whether you need a technology solution like Minerva or not. If you are unclear, if you are confused, if you would like guidance or want to know what other people in your space are doing and the approaches that we're seeing, I'm happy to share. So come find us.
Excellent. Put the website there as part of the show now, forever. It's the
Da,
power
da, da.
of streaming stuff. You put it on and you could read somebody 50 years from now. They'd be, oh, wow, they were talking about AML. We now could think about it and it magically happened.
Oh God, wouldn't that be cool?
The stuff. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. Excellent discussion. I feel like I've educated myself a lot more in AML than I ever have in my entire life with this conversation. So I really appreciate you for that. I always tell people it's my line that started this show selfishly to talk to experts like yourself in various aspects of fintech. The audience just happens to be watching. So I appreciate this conversation and the work that you're doing and have a different perspective on AML, like you're passionate about it and the greater cause in terms of when you look at things like human trafficking and terrorism and things of that nature. I think it's definitely inspiring, because we're in this fintech side and there's a lot about the technology or the money and stuff like that. When you bring it back to the human side, it definitely hits a different place. So mad respect to you and what you're doing.
Thank you.
To our audience, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. We are always happy to have you tune in. I'm happy with the behind the scene messages, the comments, and so forth. I wish everyone a happy weekend. I think this weekend you set fall back, spring forward. I think you set your clocks back this weekend. So that's
that's good.
Yeah, and you're
Sunlight.
gonna get extra time. Have a wonderful weekend. Next week's show is going to be a Money 2020 recap. And then we're going to have a slew of really awesome guests from now to the end of the year. We are approaching our 200th episode in a few. So that's exciting. Got to figure that and appreciate that. And I think that's it. It is a wrap. Jennifer, have a spectacular weekend. And to all, make this weekend great. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.